Hey everyone, and welcome back. So today we're going to be reviewing Thunder Kid Hunt for the Robot Emperor on the Nintendo Switch. Now this game is a low poly 3D run and gun shooter. It released on March 23rd of 2022 and it currently sells on the US eShop for $7.99. The game is being published by eSHOP and it has a download size of only 103 megabytes. Now, is this going to be a great 3D shift of the retro run and gun shooter, or has unfortunately this game missed the mark? That's what we're going to find out in today's review. Just remember, if you are liking the content, consider hitting that like button. If we start with the storyline, I'll be honest with you all, there isn't much here. You actually get way more from the description on the Nintendo Switch eShop than the actual game itself, which gives you basically a one-page text explaining to you that after the war between the US and Canada, the AI robots have decided to rebel against humanity and try to take over the planet. It is up to Thunder Kid to fight his way up to the Robot Emperor and save the day. Now, you do get a few monologues from the bosses before the fight starts, but they pretty much all follow the same pattern and don't really give you much more information. Their point being, they're going to kill you, humanity sucks, it's hopeless. But you know what, we never really needed a deep storyline for a run and gun shooter, so let's move on. Now, if we jump into that gameplay. Now, for the most part, this game is trying to deliver what it describes, with very low poly-res visuals and an overall 3D environment that you have to run through and shoot at the enemies. The problem is that pretty much sums up all of the gameplay. Pretty much every level is like moving through different corridors. Yes, the enemies do get more complex as you move through your game, but there's no power-ups, no special abilities, all you do is jump and shoot. Now, if these levels were expertly crafted and this was very well done, you know what, it could be enough to pull through a simple game. However, the problem here is rather than feeling like a fast-paced run-and-gun shooter, most of the tactics you're going to have to use are going to fall into one of two categories. Either take a very strategic approach, timing your shots in between the shots of your enemies, and basically taking a very slow-moving approach to the gameplay. Or strategy number 2 is skip killing pretty much 90% of the enemies, jump between the shots, and run to the end of the level. Now, every 3 or 4 levels, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you will fall into a boss fight. And these are probably the high point of the game. Now, although these boss fights also happen on a 3D plane, they're generally in a closed-off environment, more like a bland room, and it resembles much more a bullet hell shooter at that point. All you have to do is memorize the boss's patterns and how to get by each one of its waved attacks, and basically you'll conquer all the bosses. Now the game says that as you'll be moving through it, you'll be going through forest, caves, cliffs, and cityscapes, but let's just correct something right there. All it is a color swap from one level to the other. But very little is done to make anything feel like a forest, a cave, or a cityscape. Now you will encounter a variety of enemies throughout the game, however little changes other than different shooting patterns or slightly different movement. Now another slight feature of the game is that it does offer branching paths throughout the levels, however this sums up to pretty much choosing which type of enemy you want to confront. Or if you want to go through a section more focused on platforming versus more focused on combat. There are also hidden coins in each one of the levels, however so far as I can see, they don't really unlock anything other than just being some collectibles. Now by my tone and description, you're probably getting the feeling that I was overall disappointed by the gameplay. And you would be right. I did find it quite shallow, and at under 2 hours to complete this game, no power-ups, no upgraded abilities, nothing to break up the gameplay, it was rather monotonous. Now we will discuss the controls, however it will be a very short section because there's not much to understand here. The controls here basically break down to 2 things, jump with B and fire with Y. On a positive note, you can hold down the fire button rather than needing to mash it. However, on a negative note, The controls are rather floaty in this game, and especially for a run and gun shooter where you would like to be able to react quickly to different elements, this is a disappointing feeling. And most of the platforming difficulty in this game doesn't actually come from the design, it rather comes from the lackluster controls and the difficult perspective you actually have to play from. On top of it, as I mentioned earlier, if you actually want to fight and blast your way through the levels, it won't feel like a fast-paced run-and-gun shooter, rather a very slow-moving strategic shooter. Now that in itself isn't a bad thing, it just doesn't mesh very well with the overall presentation and gameplay. But that pretty much sums it up for the controls section. Now, if we move on to the graphics and sound. Now, I think my favorite word of this review is going to be lackluster, but that yet again is going to sum up my feelings of both the graphics and the sound here. Now, if you watch my channel regularly and you look at the games I play, I have no problem with retro-styled or low-resolution graphics. However, I have no problem with those elements when they feel like an artistic choice and not just done to save money or be lazy. And the overall feeling you get from the presentation of this game is that the low poly visuals weren't chosen as an artistic viewpoint, but rather a way to shorten the development cycle. I find the design on the enemies lack inspiration. Even the bosses themselves that should be the high point of this game just look like random polygons that have been slapped together. And lastly, the sound is maybe the least problematic of all the concepts. However, once again, it just feels uninspired. You've got a few tracks on a loop. They are fast-paced, they do sometimes match the action, but overall, nonetheless, you're probably not going to remember this soundtrack. So now we get to the verdict. And if this is the first time watching one of my reviews, my full rating scale is down below in the description of the video. And in this case, I'm going to be giving Thunder Kid Hunt for the Robot Emperor a 5 out of 10, putting it at the low end of a playable game. Now, my overall feelings on this game is that it is playable. It's not broken. You can finish this game. There are no major bugs. However, as I said earlier, everything just feels lackluster and uninspired. And as I said earlier, to top it all off, I managed to finish this game in under 2 hours. And overall, at $8 or less, there are a ton of better games out there that I would rather spend my money and my time on. And overall, my feeling at the end of the 2 hours, I was slightly bored by the monotonous gameplay and I was pretty much ready to move on. And it's really too bad, because had the developer at least thrown in a few upgradable abilities, a few power-ups, something like that to break up the gameplay, this game could have ended up being pretty decent. So now I throw it all out to you. Have any of you played this game and do you agree with my review? Are you maybe going to be picking it up nonetheless? Let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget on the way out that if you did like this review, consider hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel if you aren't already, and hitting the notification bell so you know when all my future content comes out. And as usual, I hope I'll see you in my next video.